I found out that my wife was cheating on me when my flight was canceled. When I started the divorce process, she got drunk and got into an accident. My life has taken such unexpected turns in the past year that I'm still struggling to make sense of it all. I guess I should start from the beginning. I met Melanie during our sophomore year at State University. We were both business majors, but we met in a general education art history class. I remember being struck by her confidence and how she always had insightful comments during discussions. We started studying together, and soon our relationship blossomed into something more. Melanie came from a well-off family in the suburbs. Her dad, Robert, owned a successful construction company, and her mom, Linda, was a high-end real estate agent. They had a beautiful home with a pool and always took lavish vacations. Melanie was their only child, and they doted on her. My background was quite different. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood. My dad, Jim, was a mechanic who owned a small auto repair shop. My mom, Karen, taught elementary school. We didn't have a lot of extra money, but my parents worked hard to provide for me and my younger sister. Despite our different upbringings, Melanie and I connected over our shared ambitions. We both dreamed of climbing the corporate ladder and making names for ourselves in the business world. We pushed each other to excel in our studies and internships. After graduation, we both landed entry-level positions at marketing firms in the city. The first few years of our careers were a whirlwind of long hours, networking events, and steadily climbing the ranks. We got married 2 years after college, with a beautiful ceremony that blended both of our family's traditions. Melanie's parents gifted us a generous down payment for a house in a nice suburb, not far from where she grew up. My parents couldn't contribute financially, but they helped us move in, and my dad did a lot of repairs and renovations on the house. Our early married life was busy but fulfilling. We were both focused on our careers, often working late and bringing work home on weekends. But we always made time for each other, whether it was trying new restaurants in the city or taking weekend trips to nearby towns. As we approached our 5th wedding anniversary, we started talking about having kids. We both felt established in our careers and financially stable. We agreed to start trying after our upcoming anniversary trip to Hawaii. Looking back, I realized that's when things started to change. Melanie seemed more distant and distracted. She was working later than usual and going out with co-workers more often. When I asked about it, she said she was working on a big project that could lead to a promotion. I tried not to worry. Melanie had always been ambitious, and I wanted to support her career goals. Plus, we had always had a strong foundation of trust in our relationship. Melanie had been cheated on in a previous relationship in college, and she often talked about how painful that experience had been. I never imagined she would put someone else through that kind of betrayal. About a month before our anniversary trip, I had a business trip scheduled to meet with some potential clients on the West Coast. It was supposed to be a week-long trip, and Melanie and I had made plans for a nice dinner the night before I left. The day of my flight, I got to the airport and found out there were mechanical issues with the plane. After several hours of delays, the flight was eventually canceled. Frustrated but also a bit excited to surprise Melanie, I decided to head home. I stopped and picked up some flowers and a bottle of wine, thinking we could still have our nice dinner. When I pulled up to our house, I noticed an unfamiliar car in the driveway. I figured it might be one of Melanie's co-workers dropping her off. As I walked into the house, I heard noises coming from upstairs. My heart started racing as I climbed the stairs, a sense of dread growing with each step. When I reached our bedroom door, I heard Melanie's voice, and a man's voice I didn't recognize. I burst into the room, and the scene before me shattered my world. Melanie was in our bed with a man I'd never seen before. They scrambled to cover themselves, both looking shocked and panicked. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just turned and walked out, ignoring Melanie's calls behind me. I got in my car and drove, with no destination in mind. I ended up at a park where Melanie and I used to have picnics when we first moved to the suburb. As I sat there, memories of our relationship flashed through my mind. Our first date, when we went to a college football game and got caught in a rainstorm. The night I proposed, on the beach at sunset during a trip to Florida. Our wedding day, when I thought my heart would burst with happiness as I watched Melanie walk down the aisle. How could she do this? How long had it been going on? Was our entire marriage a lie? I don't know how long I sat in that park, but it was dark when I finally drove home. Melanie was waiting for me, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She launched into apologies and explanations, saying it was a mistake and it had only happened a few times. I learned that the man was a client she had been working with on her big project. She said things had gotten flirtatious during late nights at the office, and one thing led to another. She swore it didn't mean anything, and that she still loved me. But her words just washed over me. All I could think about was the image of her with another man in our bed. The bed where we had talked about our dreams, comforted each other after bad days, and planned our future family. I told Melanie I needed space, and that she should go stay with her parents for a while. She begged me to reconsider, to give her another chance. But I couldn't even look at her without feeling sick. The next few weeks were a blur. I threw myself into work, staying at the office until late at night to avoid going home to an empty house. I ignored calls and messages from Melanie and her family. My own parents were furious when they found out what happened. My mom especially had always been a bit wary of Melanie, feeling she was spoiled and took me for granted. Friends and coworkers could tell something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to talk about it. How could I admit that the woman I thought I knew better than anyone had betrayed me so completely? I started meeting with a divorce lawyer to understand my options. The thought of ending my marriage was devastating, but I couldn't see how to move forward after such a massive breach of trust. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Melanie with that other man. As word of our separation spread, people were shocked. We'd always been seen as the perfect couple, the ones who had it all figured out. I put on a brave face at work, but inside I was falling apart. I couldn't eat or sleep properly, and I lost weight rapidly. Melanie kept trying to contact me, alternating between apologizing and getting angry that I wouldn't talk to her. Her parents reached out, asking me to consider marriage counseling, but I wasn't ready to even think about reconciliation. I started seeing a therapist to try to process my emotions. It helped a bit, but I still felt lost. The future I had envisioned with Melanie, kids growing old together, was gone. I didn't know who I was without her, and that realization was almost as painful as the betrayal itself. Looking back, there were probably signs I missed. Melanie had become more protective of her phone. She had started dressing up more for work and wearing more makeup. But I had always prided myself on not being a jealous or suspicious husband. I had trusted her completely, and she had taken advantage of that trust. As the weeks dragged on, the reality of our situation started to sink in. We had to start discussions about dividing our assets and what to do with our house. It was painful to see the life we'd built together reduced to cold legal negotiations. I still don't fully understand why Melanie cheated. Was I not attentive enough? Had she fallen out of love with me? Or was she just selfish and impulsive? I may never know the whole truth. All I know is that the woman I thought I knew better than anyone turned out to be a stranger. And that's where things stand now. I'm still living in our house, but it doesn't feel like home anymore. Every room holds memories that now feel tainted. I'm trying to focus on my work and figure out what I want my life to look like moving forward. But right now, everything just feels uncertain and painful. Update 1. It's been a couple of months since my last post, and somehow the situation has become even more complicated. I'm still struggling to process everything that's happened. After the initial shock wore off, I became more resolute in my decision to divorce Melanie. Her betrayal was something I couldn't move past, no matter how much she pleaded or how many times her parents reached out to me. I formally asked her to move out of our house and stay with her parents while we sorted out the legal details of our separation. Melanie didn't take the news well. She started drinking heavily, something she had never really done before. Her usual glass of wine with dinner turned into a bottle or more. Her work performance began to slip, and she was put on probation at her job. Her parents were beside themselves with worry, calling me frequently to update me on her state and beg me to reconsider. I was too caught up in my own pain to really care about Melanie's downward spiral. Part of me felt she deserved to suffer for what she had done to our marriage. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects and staying late at the office most nights. My boss was understanding of my situation and even hinted at a possible promotion if I kept up my increased productivity. One night, about a month after I'd asked for a divorce, I was working late at home when I heard a commotion outside. I opened the front door to find Melanie on our porch, clearly intoxicated. She was swaying on her feet, mascara streaking her face, reeking of alcohol. She pushed past me into the house, alternating between sobbing apologies and hurling angry accusations. She claimed she felt neglected because I was always working late and never made time for intimacy. She said she had only cheated because she was lonely and felt unappreciated. I tried to calm her down, but she was hysterical. She knocked over a lamp, shattering it on the floor. She accused me of never really loving her, of caring more about my career than our marriage. It was all nonsense, of course. I had always prioritized our relationship, but Melanie was too drunk to be reasoned with. As she shouted, more details of her affair came out. It hadn't just been a few times, as she'd initially claimed. It had been going on for months. She and her client had taken business trips together, using work as an excuse to spend weekends in hotels. They had even talked about a future together. Each new revelation was like a knife to my heart. I felt sick thinking about all the times I had kissed her goodbye as she left for a business trip, not knowing she was going to meet her lover. I thought about all the late nights I spent working, believing Melanie was doing the same, when really she was in another man's arms. After about an hour of this, I finally managed to get Melanie to leave. I called her parents to let them know she was on her way home and that they should keep an eye on her. I felt drained and emotionally exhausted. I poured myself a stiff drink and sat in the dark, wondering how my life had fallen apart so completely. A few hours later, I got a call that made my blood run cold. Melanie had been in a car accident. She'd run a red light and T-boned another vehicle. The other driver was okay, but Melanie had been rushed to the hospital with severe injuries. Despite everything, my heart dropped. As angry as I was at Melanie, I never wanted anything like this to happen to her. I raced to the hospital, my mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. When I arrived, the doctors gave me the devastating news. Melanie was paralyzed from the waist down. They weren't sure if she'd ever walk again. The image of my once vibrant, active wife confined to a wheelchair was almost too much to bear. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of hospital visits, discussions with doctors, and difficult conversations with our families. Melanie's parents were beside themselves with worry and grief. They begged me to reconsider the divorce, saying Melanie needed me now more than ever. My own parents had mixed reactions. My dad was sympathetic, saying that no one deserved to go through something like this. But my mom was less forgiving. She'd never been Melanie's biggest fan, and she saw this as Melanie facing the consequences of her own reckless actions. She reminded me that Melanie had chosen to drink and drive just as she had chosen to cheat. As Melanie started her long recovery process, she tried to use her condition to guilt me into staying. She said she couldn't handle physical therapy and adjusting to her new reality without me by her side. She claimed that her cheating was partly my fault for not being attentive enough, and now she was being punished for it. I'll admit, part of me felt guilty. I wondered if I could have done more to prevent this whole situation. If I had been home more, would Melanie have been less likely to cheat? If I had agreed to work on our marriage instead of pushing for divorce, would she have turned to alcohol? But deep down, I knew Melanie's actions were her own choices. Her accident, while tragic, didn't erase the pain of her betrayal or the months of lies and deceit. Our families tried to intervene and help us work things out. Melanie's parents offered to pay for couples counseling. My dad suggested we take some time apart to clear our heads before making any permanent decisions. But my mom was adamant that I shouldn't throw away my life, caring for someone who had betrayed me so thoroughly. The whole situation put an enormous strain on everyone involved. Melanie's recovery was slow and difficult. She struggled with depression and anger over her condition. Some days she would beg me to give our marriage another chance. Other days she would lash out, blaming me for everything that had gone wrong. I was torn between feeling obligated to help her and wanting to move on with my life. I spent countless hours at the hospital and rehabilitation center, helping Melanie with her physical therapy and trying to support her emotionally. But every time I looked at her, I was reminded of her betrayal. Friends and co-workers didn't know how to react. Some thought I was heartless for considering divorce when Melanie was in such a vulnerable state. Others understood my position and supported my decision to leave. It felt like everyone had an opinion on what I should do. My work started to suffer as I tried to balance my job with Melanie's care. The promotion that had been hinted at seemed to be slipping away. I was exhausted all the time, running between the office, the hospital, and meetings with lawyers. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself at a crossroads. Could I forgive Melanie's infidelity in light of her accident? Or was this the universe's twisted way of giving me an out from a broken marriage? The weight of this decision was crushing me. In quieter moments, I thought about the life Melanie and I had planned together. We were supposed to start trying for a baby. We had talked about buying a vacation home in the mountains. All those dreams now seemed like they belonged to different people. For now, I'm taking things one day at a time. Melanie is still in the rehabilitation center, learning to navigate her new reality. I'm still living in our house, though it feels more like a museum of our failed marriage than a home. The divorce proceedings are on hold while we figure out what Melanie's long-term care will look like. I don't know what the future holds. Some days I think I can move past the betrayal and be there for Melanie as she recovers. Other days, the pain and anger feel as fresh as the day I discovered her affair. I'm trying to be patient with myself and not rush into any decisions, but the uncertainty is killing me. That's where things stand now. I'm still wrestling with what to do, trying to balance my own needs with the obligation I feel towards Melanie. It's an impossible situation, and I'm not sure there's any right answer. I just hope that someday I'll find peace with whatever decision I make. Update 2. It's been about 6 months since my last update, and I've finally taken some decisive steps to move forward with my life. After much soul-searching and many difficult conversations, I went through with the divorce. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew it was the right one for me. Melanie's accident and resulting paralysis were tragic, but they didn't erase the pain of her betrayal or fix the underlying issues in our relationship. The divorce proceedings were messy and emotionally draining. Melanie's parents tried to paint me as the villain, abandoning their daughter in her time of need. My own family was split. My dad urged me to reconsider, while my mom fully supported my decision to leave. In the end, we reached a settlement that I felt was fair. I gave Melanie a significant portion of our shared assets to help cover her ongoing medical expenses and rehabilitation costs. I also agreed to continue paying for her health insurance for a year to ensure she had proper care during her recovery. Once the divorce was finalized, I helped Melanie move back in with her parents. They had renovated their house to make it wheelchair accessible and were committed to supporting her through her recovery and adjustment to her new reality. It was a relief to know she would be well cared for, even if it wasn't by me. The day I dropped Melanie off at her parents' house was one of the hardest of my life. Despite everything that had happened, we had shared years of happy memories together. Saying goodbye to that chapter of my life was painful, but I knew it was necessary. After the divorce, I threw myself into my work. My boss had been understanding throughout the whole ordeal, and he offered me a promotion that would require relocating to our company's office in another city. I jumped at the opportunity for a fresh start. Moving to a new city was both exciting and terrifying. I had to leave behind the support network of friends and family I'd relied on during the tumultuous past year, but I also saw it as a chance to reinvent myself and build a new life on my own terms. The first few months in my new city were challenging. I worked long hours, trying to prove myself in my new role and avoid dwelling on the past. On weekends, I explored my new surroundings and tried to make connections with my coworkers and neighbors. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. I joined a gym and got back into shape. I took up new hobbies like rock climbing and photography. I even went on a few casual dates, though I wasn't ready for anything serious yet. I still think about Melanie sometimes, wondering how she's doing with her recovery. But those thoughts come less frequently now. I've accepted that our chapter together is closed, and I'm focused on writing the next part of my story. My family has been supportive of my move and new life. My mom especially is happy to see me moving on and healing. My dad has come around too, realizing that staying with Melanie out of guilt wouldn't have been healthy for anyone. This whole experience has taught me a lot about resilience and the importance of self-care. I've learned that it's okay to prioritize my own happiness and well-being, even when others might judge me for it. I'm not the same person I was a year ago, but I think I'm stronger for having gone through this. As I settle into my new life, I'm cautiously optimistic about the future. The pain of Melanie's betrayal and the trauma of the aftermath will always be a part of my story, but it doesn't define me. I'm ready to see what this next chapter holds.